During the intro of Tears of the Kingdom, we see one of the most shocking events of the entire Legend of Zelda series: the breaking of the Master Sword. After finding a mummified Ganondorf, Link and Zelda are attacked. Link is critically injured, and the Master Sword is shattered. If we take this event at face value, the sword broke because this Ganondorf is just that powerful, his power amplified by his secret stone. But does that not sound a little weird? That the Master Sword, this heavenly blade created by the goddess Hylia, that has been a major part of the series for years, can even break to begin with? Previously on this channel, I've suggested it had something to do with demise, but in this video, I'd like to give another possibility. There's an existing theory that the hero and the blade share a connection, and that the health of Link is reflected by the durability of the sword. Because Link is critically wounded here, the sword mirrors his condition, becoming weaker as well. Weak enough that a direct attack from Ganondorf is powerful enough to break the sword. I would like to expand on this idea by suggesting that the Master Sword broke not just because Link was physically weakened, but spiritually weakened as well. Tears of the Kingdom wants to show us that the sword gets broken as a way to demonstrate how powerful this version of Ganondorf is. Later on in the game, we learn that gloom is acidic, and it decays most of the weapons found in Hyrule. The idea is that Ganondorf's gloom decayed the Master Sword, making it weak enough to break. The problem is the Master Sword gets stronger in the presence of evil, as we can see by its blue glow. It was also created by a goddess, and tempered by sacred flames, so it still feels weird that it could be broken in general. There's also the fact that the sword has been used against other versions of Ganondorf before, other Ganondorfs who held either a piece of the Triforce or the complete Triforce itself, and in none of those instances did the sword break. Knowing the Triforce is more powerful than the Secret Stones, how could Tears Ganondorf break the sword, but the others couldn't? There's also no gloom in Breath of the Wild. Instead, we have a weaker form known as Malice, which originates from Calamity Ganon. And when we do see the Master Sword damaged in the past, it's from fighting possessed Sheikah Guardians. So what could have been the cause of the sword's damage then? Like I mentioned before, there's an existing theory that states that the strength of the Master Sword is directly related to the strength of Link, or the strength of the hero's spirit, as discussed in these videos by HMK. According to this theory, 100 years before Breath of the Wild, the Master Sword is damaged and rusted because Link is fatally wounded, or is killed if you believe that theory. Link being weakened weakens the Master Sword, causing it to take damage. At the start of Tears of the Kingdom, we see a similar thing. Link is critically injured by Ganondorf's gloom, with his arm getting seriously injured and his health and stamina getting weakened. And so because Link is weakened, the sword matches, allowing Ganondorf to break it. These are the only two times in the series where we see the Master Sword get damaged, and one thing these events share is that Link himself is weakened. To explain my supporting theory, we have to back up a second. What makes Link worthy of the Master Sword? There is no Link that starts the game with the sword. They must earn it. Link only has it at the beginning of Tears of the Kingdom because he earned it in the previous game. There's a quote from the Deku Tree after completing the Trial of the Sword in Breath of the Wild, where he says that Link's mind, body, and soul are now ready to wield the Master Sword at its full potential. Similar to how one must have a balance of power, wisdom, and courage to use the Triforce, representing enlightenment for the individual, I believe it's the strength of Link's mind, body, and soul that makes Link worthy, almost like the sword represents enlightenment for the hero. And those traits being in balance is what is reflected by the sword. Every game features a Link going through a hero's journey, and progressing through the trials and adventures are what strengthen his mind, body, and soul, and allow him to grow into the hero he is meant to be. By the time he reaches the Master Sword, he's completed enough of his hero's journey and grown enough in those three traits to be worthy of the blade. we can actually visualize this growth in-game as well. In my Happy Mask Horned Statue video, I explained how the horned statue makes Faustian bargains, basically selling one's soul to the devil. Link can buy and sell parts of his spirit, which is represented by his heart containers and stamina vessels. From this logic, the strength of Link's spirit is shown by how many heart containers he has, and also in the Switch games, his total stamina. Whenever Link takes damage, his health drops, which we can see by how full those heart containers are. This represents his physical strength, or his endurance, since if he runs out of health, he dies. His mental strength. While there are no stats we can look at, we can gauge its strength by how far along his hero's journey he is. The more temples and dungeons and trials he completes, the more experience he gets, and the more he learns what it means to be the hero. All of this means that getting a heart container is actually way more meaningful than just increasing Link's health. It's a symbol for the growth of his mind, body, and soul, and his progression towards becoming the hero. Let's take Breath of the Wild for example. Purifying a divine beast rewards Link with a heart container, demonstrating his physical and spiritual growth, and his experience completing that trial. Completing the Sheikah Shrines does the same thing, except instead of a heart container, Link receives a spirit orb, which also represents Link's growth, but not as much, requiring 4 orbs to exchange for a heart container or stamina vessel. To be worthy of the Master Sword, Link must have at least a certain number of heart containers, meaning he must be strong enough in mind, body, and spirit to be able to claim the sword. And he does this by completing enough of his hero's journey to grow enough to be the hero. The Trial of the Sword then is not a test for the Master Sword, but a test for Link to demonstrate how strong that balance is. Completing the trial, showing that he is worthy, unlocks the true power of the Master Sword. The point I'm getting at here is that in the 2 games where we see the Master Sword get damaged, this mind-body-soul balance is broken. In Breath of the Wild, after having faced so many Sheikah Guardians, Link is physically exhausted. We don't see his health bar, but if we could, it would look like this. His max heart containers would be high, but he would have very little health. His mind and spirit would be strong, but not his body. And so because this balance is thrown off, the sword becomes weaker and it takes damage. In Tears of the Kingdom, it's not just his body that gets injured, but his soul as well. Physically, his sword arm gets burned or corroded, but spiritually, we see his total heart container count drop, meaning his spirit is also weakened. Going off of my theory, this means only the strength of his mind remained, breaking that balance even more than it was in Breath of the Wild. And this weakened the sword enough to allow Ganondorf to break it. There is a line of dialogue from the Great Deku Tree that initially sounds like it disproves this theory, but I believe it gives an extra detail to the Master Sword. The Deku Tree says that the sword absorbs sacred energy over time, meaning it has limitless potential. We see this sacred energy when the sword is in the presence of evil, like at the start of Tears of the Kingdom. So why would the sword break if the sword had gotten stronger from the sacred energy? An idea I've seen suggested online is that the sword has 2 different strengths, the strength of the blade itself and the strength of the energy it holds. This means the sword can theoretically absorb infinite energy, like the Deku Tree says, but the physical blade itself still has a set durability, which if we go off my theory, would be equal to the balance of Link's mind, body, and soul as the hero. In conclusion, Link can only be worthy of the Master Sword if he has a strong enough mind, body, and soul, and the balance of these 3 traits is what makes the Master Sword strong. In Breath of the Wild, this balance is disturbed when Link becomes physically injured, allowing the sword to take damage. But in Tears of the Kingdom, this balance is disturbed even more when Link is physically and spiritually damaged, weakening the sword and allowing it to be broken. But what do you think? If you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.